All right, thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Sebastian. And let's get straight into it. So Klarna attracted a lot of attention this year. But you also been vocal saying that the headlines are not capturing the whole story. So what's the one thing that they've been missing?
Wow, a lot of things. Yeah, I don't know. I think that well, maybe one thing that I think is interesting is, right, Klarna was a profit-making company up until 2018-19. Saw an opportunity in the US. We went for it, which is difficult. It's interesting to go from Europe to US. We increased our investments a lot, right? And started investing a lot. I think even that's actually one of the most confusing things is that media seems to have a hard time separating between losses and investments. But we started investing a lot. And as a consequence of that, we're showing a loss on EBT level. We came to a point where we were investing $100 million, or we were loss-making and investing much, but that meant loss-making of $100 million a month. Hearing that number, it sounds like a tremendously large number. And it is, right? $100 million is a lot. But it's always easy to look at it with the benefit of hindsight. If you consider the fact that Klarna was given a valuation by its investors of $45 to $50 billion last year, that meant that at that investment rate and loss rate, we were diluting our shareholders 2% per year. So obviously our shareholders were saying 2% per year, if you're trying to go after this tremendous industry called the credit card industry and the banking and try to catch it, what is actually genuinely $1 trillion opportunity, it's not crazy, right? Now, obviously, as then investor sentiment shifts and suddenly people don't want you to lean into the future, but they want you to show profitability. At that point in time, $100 million a month is a lot. So you need to obviously, unfortunately, as a consequence of that, we had to shift back, focus, right? So I think that's probably one of the things that and then you look at it and say, how could this be, right? But actually, it makes sense. It made sense in that environment. It doesn't make sense in this environment.
Yeah, that's right. And interestingly, the same investors who last year told you grow really fast, invest, we'll give you more money, all of a sudden changed their mind.
Very much so.
Yeah. And you managed to raise 800 million or something.
Yep.
And of course, then the market set the price, and there was a big down round. So the headline. But and of course, this is like a lot of companies are doing down rounds this year, and next year we're going to see even more. So how I think about down rounds is also it gives you funding so you can grow. And I think this is like the theme that I think about is like it enables you to continue to grow. But how did you, because Klarna is now a really big company, it's not a startup. How did you manage to go from that mindset of just investing in growth to turning this around to think about more sustainable growth and also actually getting to profitability? And so, yeah, how did you do that? And can you give us an update? Where are you on that path?
Sure. I think in our case, obviously, I do have a little bit of benefit that, I've been doing this for 17 years, 18 this year. So I'm not a rookie, hopefully, anymore. And I did take Klarna through the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, even though obviously the company was smaller at that point in time. So to me, I remember clearly when COVID hit, for a few weeks, everyone thought that the world was ending. At that point in time, a lot of investors called me and said, you have to cut your spending now, you have to adjust to new. And I said, you know what, let's wait a few weeks, see a little bit how this plays out. And it turned out at that point in time, it wasn't the right thing. It was actually different, right? This time around, in our case, in our financial plan, we had an idea of raise money. It was planned to raise money this year. And in Jan and February, we were, in our case, really preparing ourselves to tell a different story because there is a misconception that Klarna is all about buy now, pay later, and that's actually not true. Half our transactions are debit. We do tons of other features and services and so forth. So part of this was that we wanted to change and tell investors that we were doing a lot of other things. And then as we went into the market, it was a very tough environment suddenly because we were basically trying to raise money, and then every week we may have got some commitments for some money at some valuation, and then PayPal dropped 20% in the stock market. And then we got new commitments, and next week PayPal is down 20% again, right? So it became impossible. At this point in time, I actually said, let's pause this whole thing and rather face the reality that investor sentiment has shifted. And we will have to create, basically throw out the old business plan, create a new business plan that's all about getting back to profitability. We call it Get to Net internally, to have a little bit of a fun name at least around it. And so basically in our case, we had been profitable in 18 and 19. We make about $1 billion of gross profit in the European market. So we have a sound underlying profitable model. And so we set a path, which we said, okay, when is it realistic? Well, probably, after summer next year for about 12 months to get back to positive numbers. And then unfortunately, obviously, we had to conclude that it wouldn't allow us to invest as much, which then unfortunately meant changing the size of the organization, right? Which is obviously the most painful and harmful thing. But also then focusing on other things. So we started executing on that in May, June. And then once we had actually executed a little bit of that and announced it, we went back into the markets because we felt that now we could also show investors that we were actually taking this seriously and doing what was necessary. And then we were able to raise that money after that. But we had to obviously see. Now, again, the valuation drop in Klarna is not that different than PayPal's and other fintechs on the stock market. So, it's within the vicinity.
Yeah. And as long as you're not selling, it doesn't matter that much. It's what, 12% dilution or something?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, now I obviously did everything I could to participate in this round. It's a lot of money for me, but I did my best. I'm a big believer in the long-term opportunity.
Yeah. So given the experience that you have from this financing, also you've done obviously raised a lot of money throughout the years. And what advice can you give to founders who are going out, watching this, or maybe thinking about, or probably have to raise next year in this difficult environment?
Well, I think that I was, if you look at Sweden where I'm based, there was a few other companies, Kry and Voi, that took action even earlier than us. And I think to some degree, the companies like us that took actions fairly early also got maybe more negative sentiment in media than others due to that. Now it's more like everyone's doing it, so you get away with doing it in a different way. But the point being is that, like, I still appreciate that. I think, I would be worried if you don't take actions, right? Like, I think the most important thing is to realize there's a different world. You have to adapt to it and then be willing to, take the tough decisions that you have to take, right? And I get less concerned about companies that are willing to take those decisions than I am about the ones who are not, right? So I think that's the most important thing. And I think if you do take those decisions, then I think investors will look at that as well and say, okay, not everything is perfect. Maybe you still need more funding, maybe this and that. Then I would also mention one thing that's a little bit opaque, which is obviously that Klarna did not have the option to do liquidation preference or special type of stock deals because we're a bank, so we can only do common stock. Right now, it's a little bit opaque what's actually happening in the private market because there's a lot of like liquidation preferences, pref shares, this and that going on. So I think also founders should be aware that, like, even though you see some companies out there racing at same valuation or equal or slightly higher, don't be fooled by what you're seeing. Actually, the terms are quite tough, right? So I think that's also creating a little bit of a, sometimes maybe as an entrepreneur, you don't really want to see reality. And then you allow yourself to be fooled by those.
So if you had the option, which you didn't, but if you had the option to, the round you did, down round versus something that higher valuation with 2x, 3x liquidation prefs, do you know what you would, have you done on that?
That's hard. It's very difficult because to some degree, I would say yes, I would have liked to do it. Part of me says that. But on the other hand, I just feel that, like, Klarna has been strict with common shares even before we became a bank for 17 years. And I've just heard so many horror stories of having different shareholders with different incentives coming in at different places. So everything else equal, I still feel like I'm quite happy that we've been consistent about it. So I'm a little bit torn about that topic, actually.
No, I hear you. I think there's long-term alignment among all the shareholders when everyone is the same class is probably better for the long term. That's my view, at least. And So you mentioned you've been doing this for 17 years,
Yeah.
and I remember when you and I spoke, when you've done it, like you were coming up to 10 years, and you said, I've done it for 10 years, and I think I can do it for 10 more years. and then I know when I think, was it last year or this I don't know, within the last year, I don't know if it was before or after the whole crash, but when you said like you're going to do it so much longer. But so the question here is like, how do you continue to find motivation for yourself, and also how do you continue to motivate your team when they see that like because everyone is motivated by, of course, long-term stock price?
Well, I think that first and foremost, like for myself, I mean, two things, right? I do genuinely believe that Klarna is challenging this massive banking credit card industry that has been making too high profits on consumers. I think it's definitely a market that needs disruption and competition. And yes, we are also offering credit, but I think it's a healthier form of credit than the ones that exist in the market. So I genuinely believe that we're doing a good thing, but we're not just doing it because we're nice. We're doing it because we want to make money as well, right? Just to be very clear, it's a combination. But I think it's both, right? So that's is obviously in itself interesting. I'm also extremely fascinated. So half of my brain power is thinking about what does those products look like? What does the future of retail banking, fintech looks like? And what could a product look like? And the other half, which I find extremely fascinating, is how do you, it's one thing to run an organization of 50 people, it's another one having 6,000. How do you actually move mountains? Yeah. Like how do people come together and actually get things done in a astounding way? How do you organize yourselves? How do you work together? What kind of culture? These things, they're just so fascinating to me. Like, so these two fascinations, they keep me busy. Like, I think about nothing else. I've been thinking about these things for 17, 18 years. I think about them when I go to sleep or when I wake up. And that in itself, to me, is just like, that's my passion. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And so I would be so bored, sitting under a palm tree in Thailand or whatever, right? Like, so this to me is just, and I feel extremely fortunate in life and lucky to be in this position and experience this, and together with my team try, what if we do like this, and what if we look at that, and how people react, and can we do this better? I just think it's extremely fascinating. So that drives me. That's enough for me, right? And then I have some beautiful kids that I can hang out with, and whatever. Amazing. Do some fun stuff now and then. Do some horseback riding with them or whatever. So I think now I do genuinely believe part of that thinking has been, what kind of people do I need, and who should I? What kind of people should I try to attract to Klarna? If we want to move mountains. Yeah. And I think all of us will have a mix of drivers, how much money we make, what title we have, what our friends thinks about us and what we're doing, how much we actually get done in our, like there's tons of things that drives us. I find that the people that are the best are the ones that genuinely, their primary driver of all of these is they want to get things done. They want to see and explore how you actually make things happen. And so I do believe that to some degree, the benefit I have, I mean, Klarna, the proportion of such people at Klarna back in 2010 and 15 was very small. The proportion of such people at Klarna today is much higher. And that is also what helped us in this situation, because it wasn't about what does my friend thinks about me, or my title or this and that, but because it was genuinely driven by people who are trying to understand how to make things happen. I think they weather this storm better. So I think that helps, right? It doesn't make it all go away. Obviously, people were unhappy and depressed about seeing, they thought they had all this money and now it's something else and this and that. But it makes it slightly easier, right?
Yeah. And on that getting things done, and I'm sure you've been doing a lot of work then to motivate everyone to get to net profitability, and has that been something that been rallying the troops? And
we have, for sure, but I would actually say the team has done that to a large degree. I'm quite impressed by how all of our, all of the people in the organization picked it up, and and really like we have this internal channel at Slack called Winning, right? And I created it a few years ago and like encourage everyone to publish good stuff there, right? Yeah. And so like during summer, after we doing this, somebody in the organization was like, why are we sending so many text messages? Have we really ever optimized the amount of text messages we send? And then like started getting nerdy about it and realized there was something wrong in how we were doing it. And it saved $40 million a year, right? And then they publish it on Winning, right? Yeah. And you're like, awesome. Wow, look at this. Like the whole company just changed their focus. They realized, okay, now this is the focus. They started going after it. Yeah. They find these amazing opportunities. And obviously you can say, oh, we were stupid that we didn't see that earlier. Fine, but you know, that's just the reality of life. You're very focused at growth, or you're very focused at, you know, at optimization. And I think it's difficult to do both at the same time. You can do a little bit of both, but it's hard.
Yeah. No, amazing. And it's fascinating that you can do that with such a big organization. But you also I know that you've gone through waves and changes, and you've been learning and as a leader as well along the way, and so from trial and error.
Yeah, that's why, you know, I had the fortune to take my top 30 managers to Derbyshire and visit the Toyota factory a few weeks ago. And it was just so inspiring to see how the culture of that organization, how they basically have created this fantastic culture where every factory workers every day comes with Kaizen and thinks about small improvements. It's super impressive.
Yeah, that's great. So one thing I've always been impressed is that you have this really long-term ambition with your business, and which I know it's been growing with when you've been, which is great. But this year and this kind of big reset and everything, has that changed your long-term ambition in any way and the outlook for the company?
No, I mean, I think again, like if you look at financial services, a few years ago, we sat in a room and we were kind of, because we actually pivoted slightly the company a few years ago when we realized that Stripe and Adyen was beating the shit out of us. So we had to change because we couldn't compete with them. And so we moved in this consumer direction that we're now. And at that point of time, we formulated this idea that eventually in the future, you wake up one morning and your financial advisor / computer will tell you, hey, I've analyzed your mortgages tonight and I realized I could save you £5 by changing from bank A to bank B. And the only thing you need to do is say yes. And that's going to happen. I know it's just like self-driving cars. I don't know if it's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20, but it's going to happen, right? And when you realize that the whole banking today, banks think about themselves as a balance sheet. And what they tell investors is we're going to maximize interest rate spread, which basically means they want to give you as little money as possible on your deposits in savings interest, and they want to charge you as much as possible on credit, right? Which isn't really aligned with customers' best interest. I think when computers get to that point, and you're seeing things like chat AI, whatever, and you're seeing like, whoa, it's getting there now, right? You realize that bank will have to change from doing that interest rate maximization to actually, how do I help my customers save time, save money, make them less worried about finances? That's going to happen, right? Yeah. So the only thing that I need to do, if I have a 10, 20-year perspective, I just need to race to try to make Klarna one of those best financial advisors in the world that will actually help people do that. And then that doesn't change because there's a current macroeconomic shift or anything. Exactly. But it obviously changes how much we can invest into that future, how fast, how we get there and so forth is affected. Yeah. But the long-term opportunity to be one of those, financial advisor computers that save you time and money is as real as it was a year ago.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's interesting. James Anderson, he talked about this earlier on stage about with exponential growth and disruptive technologies is that it's hard to predict when, but if you have patience, these things will happen. So I guess it's just you continue what you do and things.
And that's what's fascinating to your point, right? Like you say image recognition doesn't work, and suddenly Google knows exactly who is Leon and Bianca, my kids, and can separate them. And then you go to like AI chats and you're like, doesn't work. And then you open OpenAI a week ago and you're like, yes, works. Yeah. That's so crazy. That's what's so scary and cool about these technology at the same point of time, right?
No, it's amazing. Great. And so Tom and Sarah on stage here, they presented the report. And, my take is looking at highlights on the numbers is that European tech is more resilient than we maybe would have thought it was. Do you think, given what's happening this year in tech in general in Europe, that the fundamentals for Europe to deliver this like big mega companies, $100 billion plus companies can really change the world. Are the conditions changed from before?
I think, in my opinion, my impression has been that Europe is fairly well positioned, and I think it has to do with, I just feel that when I went to Silicon Valley in 2007, first time, or 2008 or whatever, there was this startup vibe, there was this like scrappiness, this like focus. And then as anything that becomes too rich and famous and successful, that got lost somewhere. And when you were visiting more recently, you didn't see that hunger, that interest, the same kind of drive. And ironically, more and more commonly, you would meet a founder in Silicon Valley, but the whole engineering team was in Ukraine.
Yes.
Right? And so I just feel that like when I look at companies like Bolt competing with Uber, like the dedication to the business of optimizing that car comes on time, like the focus on the business, it just, in my opinion, has been slightly healthier in Europe than on the West Coast, and I think that's something that we're going to see in the success of European companies.
Yeah. Well, Europe is the underdog, and maybe that will keep us more.
That's a great place to be.
I love it. Sebastian, thank you, and hopefully Klarna will be one of those big defining companies, and we just have to stick around and wait for it.